Welcome to Revenge Mangan. Today's story unfolds in Chicago. My name is Victoria, and up until one ordinary evening in my late 20s, I honestly believed I was the good daughter. I wasn't perfect, but I was dependable. I paid bills when my parents forgot, wired money when emergencies popped up, and quietly covered debts they never wanted to talk about. My life was a cycle of work, transfers, and a desperate, unspoken hope that one day they would see me as more than a walking safety net. That night, I was at my tiny kitchen table, half focused on emails and half focused on a lukewarm cup of tea, when my phone lit up with a message from my little sister. The preview read, "Guess who has a surprise for you?" There was an audio file attached. She added, "You have to listen. I swear you'll die when you hear this." I assumed it was one of Mom's dramatic stories, or maybe Dad bragging about something ridiculous. We used to share silly family moments. It wouldn't have been unusual. At least, that's what I told myself. A chill still crept up my spine as I stared at that audio icon pulsing on my screen, like it was alive. My thumb hovered over the play button, and for a second I considered putting the phone down and ignoring it. But curiosity and habit pushed me over the edge. I hit play. At first it was just background noise. Plates clinking, muffled chatter, the distant buzz of a restaurant. Then my mother's laugh cut through, sharper than I'd ever heard it. My father's voice followed, casual, relaxed, like he was discussing the weather. "She really thinks we love her?" he said, amusement dripping from every word. "What we love is her money." Laughter. Real, unrestrained laughter. Not a nervous chuckle, not a slip of the tongue. It was the sound of people enjoying the punchline of a joke they'd told 100 times. I froze. The room blurred around me, my heart hammering against my ribs as if it was trying to escape my chest. They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. I was the one wiring them money every month. I was the one covering late fees, medical bills, credit card balances. I was the one they called whenever a crisis showed up. My mind replayed every late-night call, every "We're so proud of you, honey," suddenly tinted with a sick new meaning. The audio ended with another round of laughter and the scrape of chairs. I stared at my phone, my reflection warped in the black screen. It felt like someone had taken the word family, twisted it into something unrecognizable, and shoved it into my chest. Without overthinking, I opened my banking app. Years of automatic transfers, shared accounts, and linked cards stared back at me like a digital web I'd let them spin around me. My hands were surprisingly steady as I started severing the threads, canceling transfers, closing joint accounts, cutting off every financial lifeline they'd grown too comfortable tugging. Then I went back to my sister's message thread, the audio still sitting there like a loaded gun, and I typed 3 simple words: "So do I." I hit send. I didn't explain. I didn't ask why she sent it or whether she was laughing along. I didn't beg for context or excuses. In that moment, one thing became painfully clear. If their love had always been conditional, I was finally done paying the price. Before I tell you how that one recording exploded my family, cost my parents more than they ever imagined, and forced me to choose between blood and self-respect, tell me this in the comments. Where are you watching from? What time is it for you right now? And if you heard your parents say those words about you, what would you do next? The morning after I sent that message, the world looked exactly the same. Same city skyline, same dull gray office building outside my window, yet everything inside me was rearranged. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. At first, I ignored it, convincing myself it was just spam or work emails. But when the buzzing turned frantic, I finally picked it up. Dozens of missed calls from home, messages piled on top of each other in the family group chat that usually sat dead and dusty. Victoria, the bank is saying the transfer didn't go through. Did you change something? Then, your mother is worried sick. Answer your phone. Then the next wave. Our mortgage payment bounced. What are you doing? And then, as if on schedule, the guilt. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? We're drowning, and you're just watching. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button, my chest tight. That familiar voice in my head whispered, "They're your parents. They raised you. Maybe it was just a bad joke. Maybe you misunderstood." But then another voice, stronger now, replied, "You didn't misunderstand anything. You heard them. You can't unhear it." I chose silence. I put the phone face down and went about my day. At work, I went through the motions, meetings, emails, a polite smile here and there. But every notification that lit up my phone felt like a test. I didn't answer. I didn't reply. Every unanswered call was another inch of distance between us. And for once, that distance felt like protection instead of abandonment. That evening, I sat on the couch with my boyfriend, Ethan, my laptop open to a new folder I'd created. Just in case. Inside it, I dropped the audio file my sister had sent, a copy exported and labeled with a name that made my stomach twist. FamilyTruth.wav. I also took screenshots of the more manipulative texts. "You're letting us starve. People will think you're a terrible daughter." And save those too. Ethan watched quietly as I organized everything, his hand resting warm on my knee. "You really heard them say that?" he asked softly. I replayed the audio for him, hands clenched together, listening not just to their words but to how casually they said them. When it ended, Ethan sat very still. "They sound proud of themselves," he said finally. "Not guilty, not ashamed, just amused." "I used to think I was their safety net," I murmured. "Turns out I was just their favorite investment." I told him about the messages, about the bouncing mortgage payment, about how quickly concern had turned into accusation. He listened, really listened, something I was still getting used to after years of having my feelings brushed off with, "You're too sensitive," or "Stop overreacting." "You know," Ethan said slowly, "you have two choices now. You can pretend you never heard that recording, flip the money back on, and go back to the way things were. Or you can let this be the moment you stop paying for their approval." In my head, I saw it exactly the way he described. Two timelines. In one, I called them, apologized for overreacting, listened to their half-hearted excuses about jokes and stress. I turned the transfers back on, and we all pretended nothing had happened. But I'd know. I'd live every day with the knowledge that their affection was rented by the month. In the other timeline, I did nothing. I held my line. I let them feel the consequences of building their life around my income. I risked being labeled the selfish, ungrateful daughter, but for the first time, I'd be choosing myself. "What if I regret it?" I asked. "Either way, you probably will, at least for a while." Ethan shrugged. "That's what happens when you've been trained to feel guilty for existing. The question is, which regret can you live with?" Over the next few days, my parents shifted strategies like seasoned manipulators. The messages changed tone. "We're worried about you." "Are you okay mentally?" "We told Aunt Lisa you've been acting strange. We're all praying for you." They started calling extended family, framing my silence as a breakdown instead of a boundary. I heard through a mutual friend that they were telling people I'd chosen my boyfriend over the family that raised me. Not once did they mention the recording. Not once did they mention the years of transfers I'd sent without question. As the gossip circulated, my anger slowly burned into something sharper. Resolve. I had proof. I had the truth. And if they wanted to drag my name through the mud, I would no longer lie down and let them walk over me. Have you ever realized the people you love most are willing to rewrite the story to make you the villain, as long as it keeps them comfortable? And if you had proof they were lying, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you let the truth speak for you? I thought the distance would keep things from escalating further. If I didn't engage, if I didn't feed the drama, maybe it would burn itself out. I underestimated how desperate people can get when they lose control, especially financial control. It was a regular Tuesday at the office, the kind of day where the fluorescent lights felt extra harsh and the coffee tasted slightly burnt. I was midway through a budget meeting when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. Her smile was tight, uneasy. "Victoria," she whispered, "there are two people here asking for you. They say they're your parents." My stomach dropped. I had never given my parents the exact address of my workplace, just vague descriptions and, "I work in finance downtown." For them to be here meant someone had helped them, most likely my sister, eager to stay on their good side. I excused myself and walked toward the lobby, each step heavier than the last. There they were, my father, Henry, pacing near the reception desk, face flushed, energy coiled like a spring. My mother, Natalie, sitting rigidly in a chair, clutching her purse in both hands as if it might anchor her to the ground. They looked smaller somehow, out of place among the glass walls and polished floors. "Victoria," Henry said loudly as soon as he saw me, drawing the eyes of nearby coworkers. "We need to talk." There was no hello, no, "How are you?" Just demand, command. I led them into an empty glass-walled meeting room, painfully aware of the curious glances from the hallway. Once the door clicked shut, the performance began. "Why have you been ignoring us?" Natalie snapped. "Do you have any idea what kind of toll this is taking on the family? Our mortgage bounced. Our credit cards are maxed. Do you understand what you've done?" Henry's voice rose with every sentence. "We sacrificed everything to raise you, and this is how you repay us? By cutting us off like we're strangers?" Heat rushed to my face, but my voice stayed calm. "I heard what you said about me." They froze. Just for a second, their eyes flickered. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked, too quickly. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file. "The conversation at dinner," I said. "The one where you joked that you loved my money, not me." The color drained from Natalie's face. Henry's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break a tooth. "That was taken out of context," he snapped. "We were joking. You know how we talk. Your sister must have sent that without thinking." "You seem to be thinking clearly enough when you laughed," I replied. My hands trembled, but I refused to back down. "You weren't grieving. You weren't regretting. You were laughing at how easy it is to use me." My father slammed his palm onto the table, making the glass vibrate. "We are your parents," he hissed. "Parents have a right to expect support from their children. You wouldn't have what you have if it weren't for us. You wouldn't have what you have if it weren't for me." I shot back. "You built a life based on my income and then mocked me for trusting you." The room crackled with tension. Outside, I could see silhouettes lingering a little too close to the glass, pretending not to look. I took a breath, then did the one thing I knew would shift the balance of power. I hit play. Their voices filled the room, clear and undeniable. "She really thinks we love her? What we love is her money." Laughter. The sound bounced off the walls, off the glass, off the carefully neutral corporate art. Natalie looked like she might faint. "Turn that off," she hissed, glancing at the blurred shapes outside. "Someone might hear." "Exactly," I said quietly, pausing the recording. "If you keep harassing me at work, if you keep calling and texting my coworkers or spreading rumors about me to the family, I will not hesitate to let people hear this, all of it." "Are you threatening us?" Henry demanded. I'm setting a boundary, I replied. No more ambushing me at my job. No more guilt tripping me. No more calling me selfish to anyone who will listen. If you don't stop, I will protect myself, with the truth, and with a lawyer if I have to. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I could see outrage warring with fear in their eyes. They had always counted on three things: my guilt, my silence, and my desire to protect their image. That day, I shattered all three. We just wanted you to remember you're part of this family, my mother finally murmured, tears gathering in her eyes. Family doesn't threaten family. Family doesn't monetize their daughter's kindness, I said, standing up. You lost the right to use that word as a shield when you turned me into your favorite source of income. I opened the door to signal that the conversation was over. They left in a storm of tense whispers and tight shoulders, but they left. As the glass door closed behind them, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally choosing myself in front of them, in a place they couldn't control. If you were in that room with me, would you have pressed play on that recording in front of your parents? Or would you have swallowed your anger to keep the peace and protect their reputation? After the confrontation at the office, I knew two things for sure. One, my parents had finally realized I wasn't going to turn the money tap back on. And two, they were not going to accept that without a fight. The next few weeks felt like the aftermath of a storm that hadn't fully passed. The skies were clearer, but the air was still thick with tension. To keep myself grounded, I started writing again. Not the dreamy, hopeful journaling I used to do as a teenager, but raw, factual entries, like a logbook of my own life. Day one after office confrontation, one entry began. They showed up unannounced, tried to guilt me, then called me a threat when I refused to back down. I played the audio. Their faces looked exactly like my heart felt the first time I heard it. Shocked, exposed, ugly. Writing it all down made it feel real, but it also gave me clarity. If they twisted the story later, and I knew they would, I'd have my own record of what had happened. In between work and diary entries, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I started living for myself. I signed up for a weekend painting workshop, something I'd always wanted to try but had told myself was too indulgent when there were always more important bills to pay. I bought a cheap set of brushes and a canvas and spent a Saturday afternoon trying to blend colors instead of stress. It was messy, but it was mine. I reconnected with a neighbor, Sophia, who lived down the hall with her partner, Oliver. We'd exchanged polite hellos in the past, but this time, when she invited me in for tea, I said yes. One cup turned into a 3-hour conversation about bad family dynamics, childhood expectations, and learning to set boundaries. You have the right to protect your peace, she said, when I confessed that I still felt guilty for cutting my parents off. Love doesn't mean unconditional access. Her words lodged in my chest like small, bright truths. Meanwhile, my parents escalated their efforts. Again. I found out they had messaged one of my co-workers on social media, saying they were worried about me and asking if I'd been acting strange at work. They told an old family friend that I was under the influence of my boyfriend, that he was turning me against my own blood. They told relatives I'd become cold and distant now that I was doing well financially. Not once did they mention their own words in that recording. They're rewriting the script, Ethan said when I told him about it. They can't accept being the villain, so they're trying to recast themselves as victims. And I'm the villain in their version, I replied. The ungrateful daughter who abandoned her poor, suffering parents. You're not the villain, he said. You're just the one who refused to keep funding their denial. Still, the social pressure felt suffocating. An aunt texted me. Your parents are heartbroken. Whatever this fight is about, you need to fix it. Money comes and goes. Family is forever. I stared at that message for a long time, trying to decide whether to send her the audio. In the end, I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I wrote another diary entry. They say family is forever, I wrote, the ink pressing deep into the page. But sometimes what lasts forever isn't love, it's the damage. And I'm not obligated to keep participating in my own harm just because we share DNA. As weeks turned into a new kind of normal, I realized something strange. Life without their constant demands felt lighter. My paycheck stayed in my account longer. I could plan for a future that wasn't built around crisis management. I could choose how to spend my time without waiting for the next emergency call. It was uncomfortable. Yes, full of grief and guilt and second guessing, but it was also the most honest I'd ever been with myself. Have you ever started building a life beyond your family's expectations and felt both terrified and free at the same time? What's one small thing you did, like a hobby or a new friendship, that made you feel like you belonged to yourself again? The rumors eventually stopped being background noise and started walking into my life wearing familiar faces. One afternoon, an old family friend called me out of the blue. "I don't want to meddle," she began, which is exactly what people say when they're about to meddle. "But your parents are really struggling. They say you've abandoned them, that you won't even answer their calls." She paused, then added in a lower voice, "They also told some people you've become selfish, that you're choosing your own comfort over your family's survival." Something inside me snapped. I had listened quietly while they took my money. Now they wanted to take my reputation too. That night, after pacing my apartment until the floor might as well have had grooves in it, I opened my laptop and started typing. "Dear Mom and Dad," I wrote. Then I deleted Mom and Dad and replaced it with "Dear Henry and Natalie." It felt colder, but it also felt brutally honest. The first draft of the letter was pure, unfiltered fury. I told them exactly what I thought of their jokes, their manipulation, their smear campaign. I typed sentences I knew would cut deep. "You didn't just hurt my feelings. You shattered my reality. I built my life around helping you, and you built yours around exploiting me." I vented for 3 pages, then sat back and realized this version was for me, not for them. It was the letter my wounded heart needed to write, but not necessarily the one that would help me rebuild my life. I saved that document under the name Unsent Truth and opened a new one. This time, I was deliberate, controlled, surgical. For years, I wrote, "I believed that helping you financially was my duty as your daughter. I paid your bills, covered your debts, and sacrificed my own opportunities because I thought it proved my love. I never asked for anything in return except your honesty and affection." I described the first time I heard the recording, how it felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. "Hearing you say you loved my money, not me, broke something inside me that no amount of transfers can fix," I wrote. It didn't just hurt. It clarified everything. It made me realize that what we had wasn't a relationship. It was a transaction. Then I addressed the rumors. "I know you've been telling people I abandoned you," I wrote. "The truth is, you abandoned me first when you reduced my value to my bank account. I have not shared that recording with anyone yet, even though it would easily disprove your story, because I still don't want to humiliate you. But if you continue to lie about me, I will protect myself with the truth." It wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. Or maybe it was both. Either way, it was the most honest I'd ever been with them. I ended the letter with clear conditions. "If you want any kind of relationship with me moving forward, it has to exist without money. No more transfers, no more emergencies, no more gossip. You don't have to apologize perfectly, but you do have to stop pretending you're the victims here. If you can't do that, then this distance will remain." When I was done, I printed the letter, signed it with a hand that shook just enough to remind me I was human, and sealed it in an envelope. At the last second, I hesitated. Would this make things worse? Would they deny everything and escalate again? Maybe. But staying silent wasn't working either, so I mailed it. A few days later, as I was cleaning my kitchen, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "We need to talk," it read. "This isn't about anger. We're hurting, and you need to understand that." I stared at the screen, a familiar mix of dread and curiosity swirling in my chest. Were they ready to listen for the first time? Or was this just the prelude to another manipulation? If you had to write one letter to the person who betrayed you, and you knew they might twist your words, what's the one sentence you'd make absolutely sure they couldn't misunderstand? We agreed to meet at a small cafe not far from my apartment, a neutral place with warm lighting and the smell of coffee thick in the air. As I walked there, my mind played out every possible version of the upcoming conversation. In one version, they were contrite. In another, they were furious. In most of them, I left feeling worse than when I arrived. They were already seated when I walked in, facing each other instead of the door, as if they needed to rehearse their lines one last time. Natalie wore the kind of strained smile that never reached her eyes. Henry's expression was stern, but under it I saw something new, not authority, not control, but desperation. "You look tired," my mother said as a greeting. "All this drama must be exhausting for you." I sat down, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. "You wanted to talk," I said. "So talk." My father cleared his throat, folding his hands on the table like he was at a business meeting. "We read your letter," he began. "You clearly felt hurt by what you heard." The way he emphasized "felt" made my jaw tighten. "It wasn't a feeling," I said evenly. "It was a recording." "We shouldn't have said those things," my mother cut in. "It was a bad joke. We were stressed. Money has always been tight. We vent sometimes. You know how we are." "I thought I did," I replied. "Then I heard you laughing about how much you love my money." Henry shifted uncomfortably. "Parents expect support from their children," he said. "That's not a crime. You're acting like we robbed you." "You didn't just expect support," I corrected him. "You built your life around it. You made my income part of your survival plan, and then mocked me for being naive enough to help." For a moment, the mask slipped. My father's eyes hardened. "Do you have any idea how hard things have been since you cut us off?" he demanded. "We're behind on everything. The bank is calling. People are asking questions. We're embarrassed." "I'm sure it's difficult," I said quietly. "But that's what happens when you live beyond your means and rely on someone else's paycheck to hold it all together." The truth hung in the air like a third participant at the table. My mother leaned forward, voice softening in that calculated way I recognized too well. "We're not your enemies," she said. "We just want our daughter back. You're letting that recording erase years of family." I thought of all the times I'd bailed them out, the nights I'd cried over my own empty account while they reassured me that I was doing the right thing. I thought of the audio. She really thinks we love her? What we love is her money. "I'm not erasing years of family," I said. "I'm acknowledging what those years really were." That was when Henry played what he clearly thought was his trump card. "We've been talking to a lawyer," he said, voice carefully casual, "about our estate, the house, the little we have. We wanted you to know that if you keep pushing us away like this, there won't be much reason to keep you in those plans." He watched me, waiting for the reaction he'd always gotten. Fear, panic, desperation to get back into their good graces. Instead, something inside me went very, very still. "You're threatening to disinherit me?" I asked. "We're simply saying actions have consequences. he replied. Family looks out for family. If you're not willing to be there for us now, why should you benefit from anything later? I almost laughed. You do realize how ironic this is, right? I said. You spent years treating me like an ATM, and now you're using theoretical future money as a leash. I imagined, briefly, the alternate ending they were offering me. I caved. I apologized. I turned the transfers back on. I kept the recording buried, pretended it had never existed. One day, years from now, I'd inherit a house that had cost me my mental health, my peace, and my self-respect. In that version of the story, I'd win the asset, but lose myself. Keep the house, I said calmly. Keep whatever's in your will. I don't want to build my life around waiting for you to die, so I can finally feel compensated. Natalie stared at me, stunned. You don't mean that, she whispered. Every child cares about inheritance. I care about not being used, I said. And I'm done paying for love that was never real. There it was, that shift behind their eyes. Not understanding, not remorse, just fear. Fear that I no longer responded to their familiar buttons, that the leverage they'd always counted on didn't work anymore. So that's it, Henry said bitterly. You're just going to walk away? Leave us to pick up the pieces? You're adults, I replied. You made choices. You talked about me like I was a credit line, not a person. I'm not responsible for fixing that. We sat there in heavy silence, the noise of the cafe washing around us like static. Finally, I stood. If you ever decide to talk without manipulation, without money, without threats, I said, you know how to reach me. Until then, I'm done. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have, but for the first time, my spine felt straight, not bent under invisible weight. If your parents tried to hold an inheritance over your head to keep you obedient, would you take the deal and swallow your anger? Or would you walk away and risk being labeled the ungrateful one? Time didn't magically heal everything after that cafe meeting, but it did something more honest. It revealed what people really valued. In the months that followed, I didn't hear from Henry or Natalie directly, but I heard about them. A lot. A cousin mentioned at a party I skipped that my parents were in trouble with the bank, that they'd tried to refinance their home and been denied. Another relative whispered that they'd sold their second car and were downsizing, though they framed it as a fresh start. A family friend, one of the few who didn't immediately buy into their victim narrative, pulled me aside one afternoon. They're very defensive whenever someone asks why things are so tight, she said. And when your name comes up, it's like walking into a wall. People are starting to wonder what the real story is. The more they tried to control the narrative, the more cracks appeared in it. They could paint me as selfish all they wanted, but they couldn't explain away the years of comfortable living that had mysteriously evaporated once I stopped paying their bills. Meanwhile, my life didn't fall apart. It quietly, stubbornly improved. I wasn't rolling in luxury, but for the first time, my paycheck felt like it belonged to me. I started putting money into savings instead of bailing out emergencies every other week. I took another painting class. I started writing more stories, essays, fragments of the life I wanted instead of the one I'd been assigned. One evening, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment. Ethan was there, of course, along with Sophia and Oliver, plus a couple of friends from my art class. The food wasn't perfect. I burned the garlic bread and had to scrape off the worst parts. But nobody cared. We laughed until our sides hurt, told stories that had nothing to do with childhood trauma or unpaid debts. At one point, as we sat around the cluttered table, I looked at the mismatched plates, the cheap wine, and the faces of the people around me and realized, with a quiet shock, this feels like family. Not the kind that demands, manipulates, and keeps score. The kind that shows up, listens, and stays because they want to, not because they have to. To chosen family. Sophia said, raising her glass when I shared that thought out loud. To the people who don't make love conditional. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, the word family didn't taste bitter in my mouth. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the apartment was filled with the soft chaos of empty glasses and leftover food, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We lost the house," it read. "Hope you're happy." There was no signature, but I knew who it was. I stared at the message for a long time. Old habits urged me to apologize, to ask if they had somewhere to stay, to offer money, even if just for one last time. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly growing stronger, saw the message for what it was. Not a cry for help, but yet another attempt to hook me with guilt. I typed out a dozen responses and deleted them all. In the end, I didn't reply. I turned my phone face down, stepped out onto my small balcony, and let the cool night air wash over me. The city lights stretched out in front of me, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, my parents were packing boxes, blaming me, blaming life, blaming anyone but themselves. Maybe one day they'd sit together in a smaller place, look at each other, and realize that the punchline of their joke had finally landed. The daughter whose money they loved more than her had walked away, and she took her money and her love with her. Their message had backfired. The recording that was supposed to humiliate me, to remind me of my place, had instead exposed theirs. It cost them comfort, reputation, and control. It cost me my illusion of what family was supposed to be, but gave me something far more valuable, the freedom to define it for myself. As I stood there under the night sky, I whispered a quiet truth I wished someone had told me years ago. You are allowed to choose yourself, even if your family never understands why. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you one last thing. When you hear the word family, who do you picture first? The people who share your blood, or the people who make you feel safe, respected, and loved without conditions? Tell me in the comments which one you'd choose if you had to. And if you've ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to save yourself, know this: you are not the villain. You're just the main character finally taking your story back.